With all the publicity recently surrounding the debate team, I think it's a good opportunity to actually hear what the debate team has to say. So without further ado, your 2013 National Debate Tournament and CETA National Tournament champion and top speaker, Ryan Wash.
Thank you to Matt Cook and Down Commercial Street for having me. And without further ado, this is what won the national championship. Judy Garland referenced the green farmlands of Kansas when she told audiences that there was no place like home in The Wizard of Oz. But in The Wiz, the yellow brick road was walked by Miss Diana Ross, a Dorothy from the concrete jungle of Harlem, a school teacher who gave back to the community in which she resided but who was too afraid of leaving the home to venture into a world beyond it. Introduced to a Dorothy that has never gone further than 125th Street, we learned that a precondition for truly being a home is the safety that we find in those around us, because home is not a place, but rather a structure of support. As Dorothy opens the door to her New York residence to take out the trash after a Thanksgiving dinner, Toto runs headlong into a blizzard that transports the pair to the magical land of Oz, where a pair of silver slippers, snatched from the courts of Evermean, the Wicked Witch of the East, and the magic of the Wiz seeming to be her only hope for finding her way back home. Along the journey with the Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow, the jumbo cast of Misfits teaches us no matter where we're going, we can't get there alone. Faced with the yellow brick road lined with a limitless number of off-duty taxi cabs and miles of open road, Dorothy, like the rest of us, gets on down the road on her search for home place. And just like Dorothy, I was on my journey to find home. The house, or should I say the many houses that I resided at, were just that. Houses. I found it hard to find comfort in the battered woman shelter where I knew no one and everyone was scared to talk to the next person, but shockingly enough, I found it hard to find a place of peace and tranquility in the dysfunctional household where crack was being sold out of my dining room window, mice slept with me in the bed, and the food was present just as much as my biological father was. Nothing was stable. Nothing was the same. Every day was so different that I never got the time to find a place called home. It wasn't until I found room 131 at Central High School that I started to feel somewhat at home. I can say somewhat because the feeling that we all feel when we first get into debate, having to give that 8-minute speech by yourself for the first time, is truly scary. But after several practices with the other students at Central High School, we were ready for our first competition, the Central High School Urban Debate League Tournament. All the inner city kids piled into the cafeteria, all very chatty, but just to shake the nerves of the first competition. The things that eased our minds the most was to know that each student in that cafeteria was going through a trial of their own. I found new friends. I found family members. And I thought I found a place called home. After 2 tournaments, my coach felt as though we were ready for national competition. I'll never forget loading up the bus with the other 3 schools from our district and making our way up 35 North to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Once I arrived, I stepped off the bus and had a chill. I didn't know if this was my own comfort or just the freezing weather of Iowa, but whatever it was, I knew I needed to shake it because it was time. I grabbed the tub off the bus and followed the rest of the UDL students inside. As we walked into the cafeteria, 250 Caucasian students stopped their talking, their movements, and their lives and stared at us as we walked to the nearest open table to put our stuff down. And that was the first time to me that debate here had to be something totally different. So as the rounds, the tournaments, and the years went past, I knew I needed to change this space that provided me and so many other students an escape from our household. A point in my career came where I had to put down the revisions to the Patriot Act, the Learn and Serve America grants, the subsidies, the visas, the democracy assistance, and the energy production, and talk about this community. A lot of bright people get together weekends on end to bounce ideas off each other's mind, but never once do we have conversations about what takes place in cafeterias like the one I was in, or more importantly, what takes place in actual debates. I found that regardless of the style of debate that I engaged in, I could never just be Ryan. There was always a framework that I didn't meet, a way to start my politics off better, no way of evaluating me inside of debates. But I had an epiphany. Just like those students that told me to functionally leave this activity or adapt, I figured I had been here just as long as they had. We were all Dorothy's trying to find our home here, but I was never able to have a debate at my house. So I'm going to do something by the time my career is over. I'm going to bring debate back to its home. We're in 2008. For Young, the proper response is not to reject home, but to extend its positive values to everyone. The ideal of home should not be reduced to a mechanism of oppression. That home carries a core positive meaning that can and should be reclaimed. Bell Hooks agrees that home is associated with safety, but she gives a positive and political meaning to these functions of home. Home place is the site of resistance to dominating and exploiting social structures. The ability to resist dominant social structures require a space beyond the full reach of those structures where different, more humane social relations can be lived and imagined. A safe home is something that in a just world would be accessible to everyone. Bell Hooks shows how crucial the safety of a home can be as a site of protection from and resistance to oppression. I want to argue for an ideal of home as a site of risk, of connection, of sustaining relationship through conflict. We can recognize and affirm the ideal of a home as a space of mutuality and conflict, of love and its risks and its struggles, of caring and the conflictual connections to others. In particular, our political homes, including our identity politics, might be seen as a place where we engage in the risk of connection with each other, and the conflictual, messy, dangerous, and intimate work of engagement with each other. Engagement in dialogue, in arguments and struggles, and openness to vulnerability, to critique and self-critique, and to change with commitment to solidarity, which with each other that mediates our commitment to our shared struggles. Shifting to an ideal of home as a space where we risk connection might help us to set clear limits on the conflict and risk so that these do not develop into violence. This might enable us to address the violence that is a response to the terror and anger at those who threaten our comfort and safety, and the response that is an assertion of the right to dominate the other within the walls of the home. If we are not looking for the perfect safety, for absolute privacy, for a return to the womb, for the mother who is the angel of the house, perhaps we can learn not to accept violence and oppression as the price of that dream. Perhaps we can imagine and embrace a different dream of a better home. If home is necessary for members of aggrieved communities to find the power to resist, debate precludes the possibility of becoming a site of resistance for those who need it now. Our stylistic norms for engagement are not only inaccessible, but discourage people from even attempting to find home. It is nearly impossible for disenfranchised individuals who have been trained to believe that they will never succeed to become attached to this activity when they don't feel welcomed. Not only are their perspectives dismissed, but they themselves as people. We can never have an ethical government official that successfully interacts with communities of color when we train them to forego a simple hello for an additional 5 seconds of prep. The current focus on the structure of debate and not those individuals who reside here means that the welcoming relationships of home are never present. Also, the form and content of our arguments are structured by the politics of displacement that necessitates the search for home in the first place. Debaters have foregone the speech for the speech doc and spew horror stories that train us to be disempowered citizens that never act in the face of oppression. Our current model of debate is disconnected from the lived realities of those affected by structural violence. That makes the activity useless to those who need it and turns oppression into a game for those who are already here. Debate should not be a place of politics where we pretend that every other aspect of our life is left behind when we get on the van in the morning, but rather we should understand for some people that their personal is political. What Diana Ross was searching for wasn't just some crammed apartment in New York, but a site of community to mutually recover from the structural violence they witness on a daily basis. In fact, I think this is the true purpose of energy. When the Dorothys of the world think of energy, they don't think of thorium reactors, but rather the energy required to get out of bed and navigate the struggle every morning. We all get our energy from home, even the workers who run the power plant. So in a sense, all energy finds its origin at home. Instead of energy production, we need to direct our attention to home production here. Just like Dorothy and her friends, before we establish answers to larger questions about what happens with a home and what is needed for it, we have to find one. Debate has somewhat been that place for me because I can say I honestly know debate more than anything else. So I feel that the role of the ballot in this debate is for the judge to endorse the team that best performatively and methodologically bring debate back home. Unlike Dorothy, those excluded voices can't just click their silver slippers and fly away, which is why we use the whiz as the 0 point that informs our political practice and our vision of home. We have to make proactive efforts to be the agents of change that ensure that this space and the knowledge produced here is accessible to all who need it. Which is why I'm convinced that Judy Garland may not have much on the fabulous Diana Ross, but she did have one thing right. There's no place, and I mean no place, like home.